Hey everyone, so in today's video I'm going to be doing something kind of exciting. This is a bit of a tradition I have on my blog, so if you don't follow that, I have been doing these kinds of posts for the last few years. I've done this for my 7th, 8th, and my 9th novel, and now I'm going to be doing the same sort of post for my 10th, and this is going to be 10 things writing my 10th novel taught me. And I did just post the blog post version of this, so it's going to be a bit of a reiteration on there, but I thought it'd be kind of fun to share what I learned in video format so it can also reach a few other people. But I probably will also share some other stuff too, but that means I did finish my novel. I actually finished my book on February 29th, so yesterday. It's a leap year, so that anniversary is not going to come too often. I thought that was kind of funny. I finished it at about 2:30 in the morning yesterday, and I cried finishing it. It was kind of a lot more emotional than I thought it was going to be. So I did finish this book yesterday, and this is not actually my book. This is just a dust jacket that I made over top this book. But this is Mothwork. A lot of you guys probably have seen me working on it in the vlogs. This is the back. I started Mothwork in January of 2019 as a means to expel some stress. I was in my final sort of semester, finishing up the first semester and then starting the second of my final year in high school, and I was quite stressed prepping for university and putting way too much pressure on myself, and I kind of needed something where I could feel not as stressed, and Mothwork kind of came into that. I had been writing little mini stories. They're spin-off stories using two characters from the Fostered series. If you guys have watched my videos before, Fostered is my mega giant series that follows a different character. So I took two of the side characters and I've been writing sort of little mini stories about their relationship. And I wanted to write another one, but because I was quite stressed in grade 12, I thought it would be kind of fun to do a longer form work. Most of the stories were about 2,000 words with them, and I'd written 3 others. And when Mothwork came around, I knew I wanted to expand it a bit, so I decided on maybe 5,000 words. And it was only until the summer when I needed to make a bit of a reach goal. I was still a bit stressed and a bit anxious because I was prepping to go away to where I am right now, and I decided pretty sporadically to make it a novel because by the time the summer rolled around, I'd already hit around 10,000 words. So I said, what's 40 more? I actually ended up hitting 50,000 words this February, so not too long ago. But I did finish the book, and I'm very excited about it. It has seen a lot of changes in my life. I am almost done my first year at university for writing, and I have finished this book during that time. Every single time I finish a book, I learn so many new things. And so I sometimes wonder, like, when I'm doing, like, the 20th things, like, the 20 things that finishing my 20th book taught me, if I'll run out of things to say. But at this point, I feel like I continue to learn even more so as I finish my work. At one point, I think I'm going to do a video about Mothwork. So if you have any questions about this project, leave it in the comments, and I can try to address those in a sort of all about my novel sort of video for this project. So the first lesson that I learned while writing Mothwork was that you can totally take your guilty pleasures seriously, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I think I actually kind of struggled with this a little bit with this project. And so this project began as a pure guilty pleasures project. I was not going to be taking it seriously. It was just something that was supposed to make me happier. This was not going to be the exact same genre that I usually write, which is literary fiction. This has a bit of a literary edge, but I wouldn't classify it by any means as literary fiction. It's just kind of like tea fiction. That should be its own genre. I was in a dilemma while writing this book. I kind of felt like I should have been putting my time toward writing something that mattered. None of the Fostered books, I've written 6 of them, are ever going to be published. So that's not what I mean by something mattering. I just felt I wanted to be writing something that would be pushing me to improve in my craft and my storytelling. But at the same time, I just wanted to have fun. I really missed the times when I was like 12, 13, 14, writing the earlier Fostered books and just having the most fun ever and not stressing so much about how things turned out, whether things were believable. I was killing characters and bringing them back 4 times. Like, it really didn't matter to me. I was making decisions that made me happy. And so I want to emphasize for you, don't let anybody shame you, including yourself, out of writing the things that you want to be writing. And if you like writing cheesy romance novels like this one, then go ahead and do it. Allow yourself to let loose and just write the things that you want to write, and don't feel guilty about making your for fun projects something that you enjoy doing and take seriously. So the second lesson that I learned while writing Mothwork was that processes change, and it's great to embrace this. What I mean by this is I took like 4,000 different approaches while writing Mothwork. I first began pantsing it. I am a pantser. I have a few videos probably talking about pantsing. I'll link one of them down below if you wanted to watch that. But pantsing is kind of the process that I've taken as a writer. I really enjoy pantsing my work. So that's kind of how I started this book. I just went into it blindly. I think I actually wrote the beginning of it in my notes app on my iPhone in the car while I was driving somewhere with my family. And so it was just sporadic. I wasn't bothering to make it the best thing ever. And I was just sort of following what my mind was making up on the spot. But then eventually the plot in this book kind of began overtaking the process a little bit. I couldn't not plot it a little bit. I just needed a bit more guidance because this book was a bit more plot heavy. It kind of leans towards genre, I think. It's not, I don't really know where it is. Actually, I have no idea what genre this is. It's just tea, like I said, the tea genre, but it really had a bit more plot. It was a lot more plot driven than my works usually are. And so I was losing track of things. So I began outlining it just a bit. And it was working out for a bit until I began to feel a bit constrained and nothing I was planning was really working out. And that happens to me a lot while planning. It's not really a big deal. I just sort of work it out from there. But I wanted to make a bit of change. And so what I did was I outlined backwards. So after I wrote a chapter, I would outline as I went. And that really helped. I kind of stopped doing this, even though it was really helpful if I was forgetting things, because when I was in my first semester of university, I didn't write this book very much. I sat down to write twice over the entire semester, probably. And this semester has been much better. I write very frequently, but because of that, I was forgetting what was happening. So that outline really, really helped. And then towards the end of the book, so the last few chapters that I've written since I've started the new year, I have gone back to sort of pantsing, and I didn't really look back at the outline very much at all. So processes change, and I think embracing that is really important. I think a lot of us like to sort of bubble ourselves into like plotters or pantsers. I know that I do the same thing too. But sometimes you can just do both. It doesn't really matter. You don't have to mix both. You can, or you can use one day, one the next day. I think just being adaptable is really important. I think following what you think the book needs is probably the best thing you can do. Doing what you think it needs, and most importantly, what the story is telling you to do. And I'll get to that in later lessons. So the third lesson that I learned while writing this book is that sometimes plans change. Don't be afraid to follow your gut. I think what speaks to this most is that I did not plan for this to be a novel. It is like 10 times longer than I intended it to be. My gut was telling me while I was writing to expand it into a novel. It was very early on into the process. I didn't have to write very much of it to know this story is bigger than I actually thought. And so I'm not going to force it to be a short story or a novella, which I had eventually thought it was going to turn into. I'm going to let it be what it wants to be, and that's a novel. And I think a lot of us can probably maybe use this as an excuse, like maybe if you were trying to write a shorter work, you're like used to writing novels, it might be like, I'm just going to write this as a novel. What I mean is, again, listen to the story, and this story didn't want to just be a novella, it wanted to be longer than that, and so that's why I went with my gut feeling. And this is also kind of how the dual point of view in this book came to be. I had finished the first 5 chapters of Mothwork, and then something in me just told me I think I need something more, but I knew that I wanted to add in a second point of view, and that's what I did. And I haven't written dual point of view like ever. Like I wrote the last time was one of my first projects when I was 12, and I haven't written an entire novel in dual point of view, and I don't read any novels written in dual point of view because I see that mostly in young adult, and I haven't read young adult in a very long time. But I just did it anyway because that's kind of what my gut was telling me the story needed. Again, stay in tune with what the story needed and not just feel like I had to do something because that was what my initial plan was. So the fourth lesson I learned is one that I want to see a little bit more talked about in the writing community, and that's to write what makes you happy. And so this, again, project started as a means to get me there, and I wanted something to cheer me up, and so that's kind of what Mothwork was, because writing with these two characters was a bit of a guilty pleasure of mine. I think that we sometimes forget as writers that writing is hard. However, what can make that difficulty a little bit more bearable is writing things that you enjoy and that bring you happiness. And, we all hear, like, the artist must suffer. And I don't agree with that. I think that you can make your art and you can take your art seriously. You can be very constructive with your art, but also really enjoy it. And you're not always going to be writing things that make you happy. Sometimes writing gets really difficult, so you can't really expect that every single scene is going to be amazing. If it is, like, let me know, like, your tips. I find that I can really tell when I'm writing something that I'm really happy about or that I am passionate about versus when I was not feeling what I was writing. Some of the chapters in the book sort of ended up dragging a little bit because I felt I had to write them, and I actually had to switch up a whole bunch of scenes. I think I cut out a few thousand words of this book while I was writing it because I had a plan and I executed the plan, but it was not sitting well with me. It was not making me happy. And so just reevaluating why, asking that question, what can I do to make this book basically bring me joy? Marie Kondo, your book. That really helped me sort of, again, stay in touch with the project and also write something that I'm proud of, that also brings me joy. Critically thinking through your problems is really important. So I'm not saying every single time you're unhappy with your book, give up on it. But what I am saying is that these things can coexist, happiness and your writing. So the fifth lesson that I learned while writing Mothwork is that things can take longer than you expect. And this does not mean you are a bad writer. And so I wanted to write this book in a month. I don't know why. I haven't written that many words since I was like in grade 10. I knew that when I was going into the summer making this reach goal. However, I did feel a little disappointed that I couldn't write faster. Not that I didn't hit the goal, but that things were going pretty slowly. And I think I felt this more so when I was in the 40,000 word range. I felt like I was stuck at 47,000 words for like 4 months. And I think it was actually because I was stuck at 47,000 words for 4 months. I think a lot of us can also constitute speed to being a good writer. And while good writers can also simultaneously write fast, I don't think that you have to be a fast writer to also be a good writer. Some books only need 6 weeks, some need 6 years, but taking your time, again, sort of tapping into your intuition and trying to write intuitively can actually really help instead of trying to rush through something. You have to look out for yourself, so I wasn't going to sit down and stay up until 3 o'clock in the morning after I finished my schoolwork at like midnight just so that I could get in my words for the day. I prioritize myself first because while sometimes you do have to just sit down and write the book, which is how writing a book occurs, also listening to yourself and knowing when you can or cannot do something is really important. Don't push yourself just because you want to write faster. The sixth thing that I learned while writing this book was that craft and play can coexist. Craft and play can coexist. I didn't get this until like about a month ago, and I've been writing this book since the summer. And so my initial idea with Mothwork was that it was just going to be a dumping ground for all of my bad writing. I didn't care how bad it was. I just wanted to have the most fun ever. Newsflash, that's not how writing works for me. A huge part of the joy I feel when writing is crafting really great sentences using awesome words. I am a big fan of delicious prose. I find a lot of joy in words themselves, and some people might have a lot of fun writing the plot or the characters or the romance or the subplots, whatever. I find the construction of actual prose really fun. And so by me saying, I just don't care what the writing is going to be, eventually it stopped being fun for me because I was dumping all of my bad writing. I don't think any writing is bad. All writing is practice, which is inherently good. However, I was dumping all of my really bad prose into Mothwork. And eventually I got tired of it because it was making me feel like a bad writer, even though the whole point was to not really care about what the quality was. And I also wasn't getting the joy of picking through a thesaurus and finding really gorgeous words that I forgot I knew, or really thinking hard on how I can describe things. And I started missing that a little bit. And so what I did do was I said, okay, then we're just going to take the prose really seriously. And this also didn't work. So I went from one extreme to the next extreme, and this showed in the work. I was picking over every single sentence with a fine-tooth comb. The comb was too fine. We did not need that fine of a comb while on the first draft. It was a bit too fine of a comb. This is just the first draft. I mean, you can fine-tooth comb your project after, but I was being too picky while I was writing. That didn't work. It was a balancing act for me, and that's what this book taught me a lot, was balance, finding the balance between craft and play, and I eventually got it a little bit. I'm not gonna lie, everybody feels critical about their own work, so I too was feeling pretty bad at some points about the writing I was producing. However, I didn't beat myself up about it as much, I just kept going. You don't have to sacrifice your craft for fun. And the reverse is also true. You don't have to sacrifice fun for your craft. So the seventh lesson I learned while writing Mothwork is also a bit of a recent discovery, and that is that your writing style can actually change from book to book. Obviously, as writers, we all have our thumbprint of a writing style. However, for some reason, I was heavily comparing Mothwork to my previous works. And like I've said, this book is not like the stuff that I'm trying to write now. What I really like writing is slow, character-driven literary fiction. This ain't that, but this is full tea. Like I said, it's the tea genre. I don't have a genre to describe it as other than the tea. I was really feeling mad at myself because I couldn't understand why the prose in this book was so thin. I was getting annoyed. I was like, I can only describe the same thing about the moon 5,000 times. I can only use the exact same adjectives. They're all derivatives of glow or shine in some form, and I don't know why my writing in this book is so bad. When in comparison, I was reading work that I'd written when I was 16, work that I wrote last year. I was like, this is some of my best prose ever. This is so lively. These words are so unique. Everything is so specific. How come Mothwork's prose just sucks? I genuinely thought Mothwork was sucking the life out of my prose. And in my video problems I'm having with writing and solutions, this is kind of the mind state I was in when I was filming that video. I was quite annoyed by Mothwork, and I thought I had regressed in my writing. And I still stand by that point, which I will get to later. However, I wasn't. It's just a different book. I only realized this when I made a breakthrough with my next novel, Houses with Teeth, when I sat down and wrote so many descriptions I didn't think were in me. Quality prose that I'd been yearning to write for like a year. And once writing that, I was like, okay, so I don't actually suck at writing. I did not actually regress. I actually am just writing a different book in a different point of view with two different characters, different genre, different everything. Why am I expecting it to be the exact same as my other works? And I felt kind of silly when I realized that, because I was like, duh, like it's different. How am I expecting that the product is going to be the exact same when these two things are completely different? You ain't going to think that an orange and a lemon are going to taste the same. They might look sort of the same, but they're not. They might have similar qualities, like rinds, for example. This is a really strange analogy, but they're not the same thing. And so once I came to that realization, I was like, and it allowed me to draft the book a lot faster and be a lot less critical about it. I'm kind of sad that I only realized this like a month ago. This would have helped 7 months ago, but that's okay. The eighth thing I learned while writing my book was that writing is not linear. And I did talk about this at length in the problems I'm having with writing. And this is kind of what I was talking about with regressing. I think a lot of writers want to believe that everything you write one after the other is going to be better than the last. And the best thing I did for myself was, I am also a visual artist, was understanding that this is not true by any means. So, for example, there are sketches that I drew 2 years ago that are better than sketches that I drew last week. And that doesn't mean I'm regressing in my art. I was actually really nervous to see how this hot take would be taken because I thought it was a bit too spicy. But a lot of people seem to like this, and I'm really happy about that. But please let me know, because I do want to know if this is just a garbage point. I think because we writers are always practicing writing, we do again want to see the very straight progression. We always want it to be an uphill battle. We don't want to be doing this, you know? I always felt like that was my goal when writing. I just wanted to beat myself every single time. Like, yesterday I wrote a chapter, now I want to write a better chapter, for example. And it's only recently that I came to realize that this is just not how writing works. And I don't know why I expected this of myself when I kind of already knew this. I knew that a chapter I wrote last year was better than a paragraph I wrote yesterday. However, a paragraph that I wrote a few weeks ago was better than the chapter that I wrote last year. So I already kind of knew this in the back of my head, but I didn't fully acknowledge it until it came to this book. I kind of got caught up in this idealistic thinking of, I want to write better things every single time I write. And I should have been thinking, I want to be a better writer every single time I write. And being a better writer doesn't necessarily mean you're producing better things. It just means you learned something from the last time you write and now you're applying it. Writing is not really a straight line, even if you feel like you're regressing. I think in a lot of ways, somebody commented this on that video, we are progressing just in ways that we can't really see. And the 9th thing that I learned while writing this novel was that the story wants what it wants. And I heard something similar to this in a lecture in my writing class, and I thought it was amazing. And so this very much speaks to the other points. This video has a theme of just let it happen, man. Just go with the flow. So if I could give one piece of writing advice, it would be to let the story be what it wants to be. And I kind of talked about this before, about how I wanted this to be a short story initially, sort of, and then eventually a novella, and then eventually a novel. And I could have just forced it to be a shorter story. I could have forced it to just be one point of view. But I'm really glad that I didn't, because I feel like I got something I was not expecting. And I love when my writing surprises me. For example, if I'm trying to make my pretentious young adult coming of age, character driven, high school, dark academia novel into a high fantasy novel, might not work out. Sometimes I find that the story just takes control. I know some people believe, the writer has control over that. If you do, please let me know how you do that. My stories usually have minds of their own, and even though I try my best, I have a vision, I plan out what I want to do, they sometimes take over, and I think that's probably one of the best things you can do. If your story is dragging you off in a completely different direction that you did not plan for, I think it can be really fun and very educational to see where that path takes you. An example of this was ending this book. I did not know how this book was going to end. I had no idea. I'd had an ending planned for a few months, since about October or November, and then this ending kind of fell apart as I wrote new things. Characters did things that I was not planning. I was like, please don't do that, and they continued to do them anyway. The motivations were all wrong. The way people felt about each other was not supposed to be the way it was supposed to be, and I was having a bit of a headache because I was like, this is not what I meant to happen. And because of that, I did not know how to end the book, because then the ending sort of just dissolved. It completely disintegrated as all of these plans changed. And so I was writing this ending yesterday, and I initially started writing at about midnight. It was quite late, maybe 11 o'clock on the 28th, going into midnight. And Something inside of me knew almost. I've written a few books, and I always intuitively know when the book is ending. Every single book that I've written has come to an intuitive end, and so because this is the 10th novel ending that I've written, I knew sort of in my heart, like, yeah, this is going to be the last day I write this book. Sounds super depressing because it was. I was really sad about it and listened to a lot of Adele the next day. In my heart, I knew that this book was ending, and so I continued to write. When 1 o'clock came, I went back up to my room. I was writing in my dorm lounge, and then I came up to my room, and I could have gone to bed. Sarah went to bed, and I wanted to sleep, but I was like, I know that the ending is here, and it wasn't because I was trying to push myself to do it. I just felt drawn to do it almost, like I really wanted to do it. So I sat down and I kept writing, and then the ending sentence like popped up. And this was maybe about 20 minutes before I even wrote the end. But I wrote the sentence, I bolded it, I put it sort of at the bottom of my document. I was like, that's the last sentence. So I knew the book was going to end. And when I wrote that sentence, I kind of stopped writing for a bit and I kind of stared at my computer screen. And I was like, you don't have to do this right now. You could just shut this computer and then forget that you almost got to the end and then never finish this book for like 4 months and then come back later, because I didn't want to finish it. I wanted more than anything to just shut my computer, go to bed, forget about it, because I didn't want to end this book. And it was only writing sort of that last bit that the desperation to continue writing it really, really hit. But I knew what I was doing and I continued until I got to the very end, and the end happened organically. And I'm so happy that it sort of pieced together. That probably sounds really vague, like my writing advice is just to do what happens, but honestly, that is what has worked best for me. I think really, again, being open-minded, listening to your story, letting it speak to you, letting what it thinks is going to be the most helpful come to you is what has been the most helpful, especially when I was writing this book. And writing the end of this book was so lovely, and I'm going to get to that in the last point. I'm not trying to throw shade at planning. I think planning is really important. If you're an outliner, that's amazing. However, I think I'm moving away from like the ways, like the labels in which we label our writing processes, letting your story breathe and allowing it to grow into its own shoes, allowing it to grow into the person it wants to be, allowing it to pick the oatmeal it wants to buy. You know what I'm saying? Your story is oatmeal. Trying to push it into a mold it doesn't want to fit into can create a story that you didn't want, but a story nonetheless that doesn't work in the way that you wanted. So I think sort of listening to the story and allowing it to take its own form can be quite helpful. I think books are like children. You know, you can't really force them to be what you want them to be, but you can nurture them a little bit. But I don't know anything about kids. I don't know what this analogy was for. So the last thing that I learned while writing my book is that it's okay to love your story. We make jokes in the writing community. My writing is trash. My characters are trash. And sometimes your characters are trash. And sometimes your writing is trash. I'm not going to discredit that. I think a lot of us are self-deprecating when it comes to our craft, and me included. I love making fun of myself, but sometimes making fun of yourself really hits in a place that you weren't expecting. And while we do poke fun of ourselves, I think we should also equally be loving the things that we do and produce. And I'm not gonna lie, this book, hella cringe, hella dramatic. However, there's hella tea, so that overrides all of the other things, because tea is number one. Do it for the tea. If people do read and I do share excerpts, I don't want them to be like, this is so bad. And I think so many of us want to please other people, and because I share my writing, I have no problem with sharing my writing. I love sharing my writing with you guys. However, I do want people to not think that I'm an awful writer. And so there were so many times I wanted to just give up on this project, because I was like, okay, if this is just a place for trash, then why am I writing it, even though I did love it? I've written things a lot of the times with other people in mind, and if you're publishing a book, obviously you want readers in an audience to like your book, but I feel like sometimes we forget that we should also like our book. We should love our books, be kind to them, give them the love that they deserve. I'm so critical of my work a lot of the time, and I was very critical with Mothwork in particular. I just did not like the writing at all. And I was saying this like up until like last week, where I was like, the writing is so bad. It's just so bad. And I might even continue to say that. It was only when I was writing the ending that I felt gutted. I was like, oh my God, this is really coming to an end. I'm not going to be able to write this again for the first time. And it is making me super sad. And so my tips are: appreciate your work before you get to the end. First drafts only come once. And we have enough hate out there for so many things. Let's show our stories some love, because there's so many good things about them. So if you made it to the end of this video, let me know what you like about your story or about your writing in the comments. Personally, for this story, I really like the amount of tea I was able to inject in 56,000 words. I don't know how I did it. I think the amount of tea is just delicious. I think I've set up a lot of stuff, and I really, really like the ending. But that's going to be it for this video. I want to thank you guys for being here while I drafted Mothwork. If y'all have been here since I've been calling this Boys on a Boat, that was the OG time. I never showed you guys the merch. Let me get that. Okay, number one lost opportunity was the fact that I didn't wear this in this video, but can you see it? You see it? My best friend Ashley made this for me for my birthday, and it's boys on a boat. A boat, there's a moon, there's water, and then... Is this not the best thing ever? Thumbs this video up if y'all would buy merch. Isn't that the coolest shirt ever? Thank you to Ashley for making it. I should have worn this in this video. This is an L. That's okay. I want to do, like I said, like an all about my novel kind of video. So if you guys do want to hear something about what it's about, who these two people are, if y'all don't know yet, ask all the questions, ask away. For now, I will link all of the Mothwork writing updates in the description if you want to catch up, if you want to read more about what it's about, if you want to read some excerpts. All of that information is going to be down below. But for now, that's going to be it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope you learned something. I know a lot of the lessons overlap, but like I said, the whole vibe of this video is go with the flow. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.